Okay, hello and welcome. I am really excited about this podcast. This is podcast number 2, and we're going to be talking about a really important subject, which again is, should we let our kids quit an activity or not? And how do we decide this? Because I think there are some things we should let our kids quit, and there's some things we should not let them quit. How do you decide? Because again, this really, really matters. So I've got kind of a formula here that is a good way that you can input some stuff into this to try to help you decide this. With me today, I've got a very special guest. This is a very good and dear friend of mine. This is Dr. Cher Edwards. We've known each other, I think, for like 16 or 17 years.
Yeah.
We've known each other for a while now.
It's been a long time.
Yep. You've helped me numerous times on our program and curriculum, and I've come to you to pick your brain about a whole bunch of stuff. So why don't we first get into your credentials?
Sure. Well, I am, as you said, Dr. Edwards. I'm the kind of doctor, if you're having a heart attack, I can only ask you how you feel about it. I couldn't actually do anything to help you. I have a PhD in counselor education. I've been a counselor educator for over 25 years, which means I've trained counselors for that long at the master's and doctoral level. And these are folks preparing to be school counselors and clinical mental health counselors. And as school counselors, they might work in elementary, middle, or high schools. As clinical mental health counselors, they might work in private practice or drug and alcohol treatment, domestic violence, sex offender treatment, agencies, just anything and everywhere. I've worked in many of those settings. I like to write and do research. I've published a book on introduction to counseling as well as group counseling. I've published numerous articles in professional academic journals. I've presented at hundreds of conferences throughout the United States and abroad. My area, it focuses on multicultural and social justice issues and counseling. I've done a lot of work with youth and kids and school-based work and community-based and kind of the gamut. But I'm a big fan of yours as well and am really excited to be here today.
Okay, well, thank you again for joining us. Last podcast, what we talked about was we talked about some of the dangers of letting our kids quit activities. This is an issue because if they do something and quit and do something and quit and do something and quit, what it teaches them is the only reason to do something is if it's fun. And that's not how life works. That is actually a dangerous concept to teach. And it's actually teaching them the opposite of what we need to teach. I believe one of the most important things parents can teach their kids is how to have grit, how to be committed to something, how to push through it. There's going to be a lot of things in life that are difficult, and some of the most amazing things in life that you can have, that you can experience, that you can accomplish, take time, take effort, require grit. So last podcast, what we talked about was I recommended that parents find an activity, and you're going to commit to that activity, and we're going to stick with that for 3, 4, 5 years. And that way, they're going to learn grit. They're going to learn how to stick to that thing, and they're going to get the benefits of whatever that activity is by sticking with it. They're going to learn how, hey, you can get good at something if you really work on that. So find one thing, pick that thing, stick with that thing, and now let them try their activities. Let them do different things, and if they want to quit, that's fine. If they want to do something else and they quit, that's fine. Because now they're learning grit. They're learning those important things from that thing. And it's beneficial because if you decide to apply for a college, they're going to look for things that you've done for 3, 4, 5 years. They're going to look for that commitment. If you apply for a job, that's an important thing to have as well. So that's what we talked about last podcast. Dr. Edwards, I wanted to get your thoughts on that. What do you think of that approach?
Well, Master Purcell, I'm glad you asked. It reminds me a little bit of sleep training. And those of us that have had babies, when you have a sleep training situation, it's miserable. It's miserable for them. It's miserable for parents. They're not happy. We're not happy. We want to run in and save them. That's what we do as parents. But the reality is that we know in our hearts, because in our minds, we've read all these books, that we're teaching them a skill that will help them throughout the rest of their life. The ability to self-soothe and self-moderate is an important concept for kids that they will use throughout their life. And we know the power and importance of sleep to well-being. So now fast forward, the important thing is that we're letting students know and letting these kids know, our children, the importance of sticking with it. And I call it stick with itness. I like your term grit. We're really helping students evolve and develop those skills of overcoming something that initially was hard. And that's really what life is about, is having the opportunity to grow and learn and experience success. I'm also a mom of two teens that happen to do martial arts, so I'm a little biased in this, but it helped them in so many ways. But I really do believe that the idea of how we're encouraging kids to learn and grow and develop, and the bottom line is that there's very few things we do once that we're amazing at. We think this is the best ever. But, like all things, there's fun parts and there's not fun parts. It's fun to hit the ball. Is it fun to do the laps and, the push-ups and is it fun to dance in the Nutcracker? Absolutely. Is it fun to, practice your splits for an hour? No. So it's just, it is a process of becoming. And I completely agree with you, the reality that these things take time. We need to give kids the opportunity to fully embrace something. And bottom line, we need to teach them the skill and the grit and the stick-with-itness that life doesn't give us a whole lot of opportunities just to quit things that aren't fun as an adult.
I want to kind of break down the psychology of this a little bit more, which is, when parents want their kids to do an activity, a lot of times, what I hear all the time is parents say, well, I like them to do this thing, but I don't want to force them to, right? A very common thing I hear is, well, I just want them to have fun. And let's actually look at this, because actually, I think that's not completely accurate. It's not just you want them to have fun, because if that's true, this is going to prove it to you really easily. Let them be on an electronic device all day long. Most kids would have fun, right? Let them eat candy bars all day. They would love that for a little while, until they get sick, right? If they play video games all day long, that can actually be a detriment, but they'll have fun. So recognize it's not just about them having fun. You want them to have fun, but you also want them learning something. You also want them gaining some sort of skill from it.
Well, Jason, there's lots of reasons why you want kids involved in activities. It's not just a paternal, like we want them to find passions and find things that interest them. Beyond that, there's a lot of research that links the importance of activities and kiddos' lots of success. There's a phenomenon we talk about in K-12 education called social emotional learning. And anyone that has a kid in school may or may not have heard this from school counselors or administrators. And we know that kids benefit from different types of interests, different types of activities. As you mentioned, colleges are very interested in well-rounded students. It is important to give kids the opportunity to experience some frustration and overcome that. These are really about teaching life lessons. The bonus of what you're talking about and what you do is not only is it a life lesson, but it's something that could literally save their lives. And so that's exciting to me to think about, certainly as a woman, as a mother of a daughter, mother of a son. I mean, the reality is that there is a lot out there. As a school counselor, we know that bullying exists. We know that there are unsafe situations at schools and in our communities. And it is exciting to me to think that the skills that I've provided or helped my kids experience through martial arts training, my own work, in martial arts training has been something that's going to not only have taught me some life lessons, but also served me well in terms of my own safety and sense of self-esteem, confidence, etc.
Here's the question, though. Let's say that they do want to quit something. What should you let them quit? What should you not? There's really 4 questions here, okay? So the first 2 questions are kind of linked. The first question is, what are the benefits that you want your kids getting from that activity? And secondly, can they gain those benefits from another activity, right? So this is something to literally write it down. What are the benefits you want them getting? So if it's soccer, well, I want them running around. I want them getting exercise. I want them getting off of their tablets. I want them interacting with other kids, right? Write down those benefits. Swimming, swim lessons, right? What's the benefit? Not drowning. That's a great benefit to have. At some point in your life, you might fall into water. The second question again is, can they get that benefit from another activity? Piano lessons, photography class, learning to paint is not going to teach them to swim, right? So this, I think, write down what are the benefits from that activity, and can they gain those benefits from another activity? And if the answer is no, well, then this is the activity that we're going to do and stick with for a while until you start having that, right? Again, with a lot of the families that come to us, they want their kids learning self-defense. They want their kids learning bullying prevention. Other activities doesn't do that. They want their kids learning life skills. They want them working on the behavioral traits. They want them, again, working on black belt listening or black belt responsibility or black belt self-discipline. Those are really, really important. And other sports can do that. We actually have mat chats. We actually have ways that kids have to show us they're making improvements by getting their stripes on their belts. That's how they get to the next belt level, by getting extra credit and getting the ribbons and medals. We literally can see them doing these things.
Jason, what I like about what you're saying is that assessment piece, is that there might be transferability. There may not be that check-in that's specifically about that. Will they learn discipline from piano lessons? Perhaps. Will that transfer to other aspects of, discipline and follow through? Perhaps, maybe even, sure. But what I really like about your program, and what I like when I listen to you and how passionately you are about what you do and the work that you have with families, is that you're very intentional about making those connections. What you do, and what I appreciate and what I've seen firsthand, is really helping kids make that connection, that this is about respect. This is about discipline. This is about follow through. And when we're telling kids these things, and we're not just saying them, but they're doing it, and you're reinforcing it, and then you're assessing for it. Did this do what we planned on it doing? Was this what we call efficacious? Is there efficacy? We hope that they get this, but did they? You're checking for that, and that's really important, and that's one of the things I love about the work you do.
And that's actually brings us to the next question, the third question, right? The third question is, what is the environment of the coach or the instructor or the other kids? That matters. Our job as parents is to give our kids the tools and the skills they need to be prepared and successful later in life, right? The problem is sometimes your kids won't listen to you, right? It's going to happen. Sometimes they just won't listen.
That never happens. Never happens in my home, Jason.
So what's important is we need to put role models in our kids' lives that are going to be there. And they share our values, right? That we can trust these people, and we know you're going to say the same thing I'm saying, but having it come from a different person is huge, right? That's really, really important.
Absolutely. 100%.
Right? So putting them in something where they have a role model or somebody they look up to that they really appreciate, and that person can instill in them some other traits, some other positive things. Having another person they can come talk to if they need to. Right? That's important. So if again, I love soccer. I played soccer. I was on the varsity soccer team. I know you played soccer. We actually played soccer together in city leagues. We've done that. But the issue is if you put kids in soccer, right? What happens next season? They get a new coach. If they're in first grade and they have a great teacher, what happens next grade? They get another teacher, right? So what I would also say is it's valuable to look at is who are the coaches, and are those coaches going to be sticking around for them? And if they stick around, that's actually a really, really valuable thing to have.
Jason, something too is, and I know this from having kids in community sports, is there's a season. What you're doing is year round. And we know that, that consistency and that repetition is so important to learning.
One other thing to add to that too, is we actually have, I just talked with a family. They're going to be going back to India for 2 months during the summer, right? And that's totally fine. Well, guess what? I talked to the parents about, what are we going to have them work on for their check marks while they're on the trip? Even though they're not going to be doing martial arts, they can still be working on the check marks. He's still working on black belt listening, and he's still working on black belt responsibility. That's really important. So even when he's gone, when he comes back, we're going to see if he can earn one of the medals or two of the medals, because he's still doing that. And he's going to be doing that with his family in India, showing grandma, grandpa what he's working on, which is awesome, right? That's a huge thing.
That's really cool. Yeah. And I really appreciate your sensitivity to that, because you've worked with kids with many, many different abilities and personality differences and strengths and opportunities to build on strengths. And you really are attentive and inclusive in your practices. And that's been really impressive to me.
Yeah, thank you. Now, the fourth question is, how do they do when they get to that activity? That is really important, especially if the kid says, well, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. You need to see how they do when they get there. Okay. I had a good friend of mine that we were catching up. And so he's like, hey, my son's playing baseball. Oh, cool. I'd love to see him. Why don't we get together? We'll have a coffee and then we'll watch your son's game. That's great. But anyway, he goes into the outfield and he's miserable. He just goes and does a face plant into the grass and just lies there and doesn't move. And they literally had to come get him and carry him off because they're like, well, the ball could hit him. He could get hurt, right? You can't just do that, right? But he was miserable, right? And so that's something where if they're there and they just absolutely hate it the entire time, they're not learning anything. They're actually being a detriment to the people around them. Whatever, right? Now, vice versa, I've had a lot of parents tell me, well, their kid doesn't want to go, they don't want to go, and then they get here and what happens? They have a great time. I'm not kidding you. 99% of the time, the kids get here, they have a great time because we make sure that it involves them. It gets them active. They're doing this. They're not just in the outfield waiting for a pop fly. With us, we are doing everything we can to make it exciting, to make it fun, to get them involved. So that's another thing to look at. And I'll tell parents, look, take them to the activity, drop them and pretend to leave, and then wait a couple of minutes and then come back and look and see how they're doing. I've got a good friend of mine whose daughter is playing soccer, and same thing. She wanted to quit, and mom comes back and she's running around and she's smiling and she's laughing, and she actually recorded it. And so then the next day, she's like, I don't want to go. She's like, no, we need to go. No, I don't want to go. You actually do enjoy it. You have a good time. Look, right? Just right now, yeah, right? Just right now, you don't feel like going, but that's not a reason to not go.
Jason, you bring up a good point. As a parent, it's a constant kind of struggle with where do I, pick my battles. And so, if a kiddo, doesn't want to eat all their broccoli, maybe that's not the end of the world. If they want to stay up all night before a big test, that's a problem. And so, where do we lean in as a parent? Where do we, kind of back off? And I think there are certain things that it's really important, and we have a responsibility as parents to make sure our kids get rest, that they have opportunities to learn and grow and develop. And so I really do see martial arts training as this space where it's important to be a non-negotiable when we're committing to our kids to learn a skill set and to be a part of something that they can really mature. They can learn these important concepts of respect, self-discipline, confidence. I mean, these are aspects, like you said, can they be developed elsewhere? Several of those aspects can be, but what is unique, just like swimming, is that it's very focused on a specific skill that we might be able to translate from piano or art or dance or soccer, but those activities aren't necessarily honing in specifically, and even if they are, they're not assessing for efficacy and to make sure that connection happens. I think those are really important things to think about as parents when we decide, where we lean into and say, this is really important and I'm gonna push this.
So let's recap this formula for deciding, do you let your kids quit an activity or not? Again, there's 4 points, and I'd recommend writing down all of these things, going through the questions and answering them and looking at it. I think this is a great way to do it. So the first question again is, what benefits do you want them to get from this activity? Or what benefits are you hoping that they're going to get? The second question is, can they get those benefits from another activity? Okay. And if the answer is no, then they need to do that thing. Okay, just plain and simple. The third question is, who are the coaches? Who are the teachers? Are these consistent role models in their life? That's another important thing, because again, we need to put role models in our kids' lives to have that consistency, to help them so that we can teach them valuable skills. We can teach them important things in life. And sometimes it might be hard for us to do that. Having another person on board to help you that has your back, that's huge. So who are the coaches? Who are the instructors? Are they consistent in their life? Are they the positive role models that you want for them? You've heard the adage, it takes a village to raise a child. This is part of your village. You're looking for that village. Okay. The fourth question again is, how do they do when they get to that activity? If they absolutely hate it and they get there and after 5 minutes, 10 minutes, they are absolutely miserable and they're not, you can't force someone to learn, right? And if that's the case, then fine, right? Then that's just, okay, we've got to find something else. But if they get there and after a few minutes, they have a great time, again, leave. I've had kids where parents have dropped them off and the kids, upset because they're there. And then the parent leaves. And then within a couple minutes, they're having a good time. And the parent comes back and they look at the parent. And then they're upset again because they don't want the parent to know I'm having a good time, right?
Yeah.
But that's a really important thing. I think those 4 points are really important, and go through that before you decide. And then if you decide, look, this is important, then this is a non-negotiable. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Edwards. Really, really appreciate it. In our next podcast, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to interview various parents that have gone through some of these difficult things. They've gone through where they realize, I want my kid to do this, whatever it is, right? Let's say it's swim lessons, and they I don't want to go. How do you deal with that? How do you actually, because talking about this is one thing, okay, it makes sense.
Yeah.
let's actually interview some parents that have gone through this, that have dealt with this, and what they've found that's been really, really helpful for them. So that's what we're going to do in the next podcast. So with that, let's call it a day. Again, thank you so much for joining me. Really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Bye. Take care.